It reminds me a lot of Raymond Carver's dialogue, where it's just very realistic. People are not talking about what you think they're talking about, which is actually the way we talk about things. All right, so this is my review of Ross MacDonald's The Moving Target. This is the first in the Lou Archer series. There's 18 books in this series, and this one was published in 1949. So before I get into like the rundown on the story and all that, I just have to say that this book really surprised me, and I found a lot to really enjoy here, and I found a lot of it really admirable. I'm not, although I love crime fiction and crime writing, I'm not a fan of detective fiction. I typically find it to just be very boring and very trite. This one really blew me away. This was suggested to me by someone recently, and I thought I would give it a try. And wow, I was really surprised here. The writing here is fantastic. It's really admirable. It's this really interesting, contradictory kind of writing where it's very terse, very short. Like some of the sentences are just so short and punchy, but it's also very cinematic at the same time without being flowery and without wasting a lot of words and without kind of veering off into poetics, which is my biggest criticism of Chandler, is that he often reads more like a poet than a novelist. So this story introduces us to the character of Lou Archer. He's a ex-cop who's now working as a private investigator, and he's working in the Los Angeles area. He's been hired by the very dysfunctional family of a missing millionaire, and the millionaire's name is Ralph Sampson. I say the family is dysfunctional because his wife is a paraplegic, and it's suggested that she threw herself from a horse in order to end her career early and I guess be a paraplegic and spend her time at home. There's also a daughter who has a crush on Samson's personal pilot. It's getting interesting. And the sort of third wheel here is Albert Graves, who's a former district attorney but is now the lawyer to Mr. Sampson. And he has got a crush on the daughter. The daughter's name is Miranda. So we've got an interesting triangle there. And then we find out that Mr. Sampson is an alcoholic, and when he's drinking, he has a tendency to give away large amounts of money and property and assets and all kinds of things in his wealth. And he recently gave away some very valuable land and a hunting lodge to a sort of religious mystic. And basically from that we can deduce that the wife, her name is Elaine, fears that the husband hasn't really been kidnapped, isn't really missing, that he's on a bender, and what could be her fortune or her inheritance could quickly disappear. From the very beginning, it's pretty clear that this novel is going to be a sort of critique of money, of California money, and a kind of wealth that, in my mind at least, is kind of unique to America. And MacDonald is going to use Archer as a kind of lens to show us what this looks like, what this kind of world looks like, and maybe even sort of pass a little bit of judgment on it. And in the process of doing that, or I should say like the vehicle that he does that with, his writing, is just, I think, just really fantastic. There's a great, I mean, it's just like, it's filled with all these great lines, but they're not the great lines where it's like the sort of punchy, tough guy kind of thing that you expect. Instead, it's actually quite observant of society. And I've got one of these great lines here, and here it is. So this is when Archer is taking a taxi, and he's kind of going into a very wealthy neighborhood where Samson lives. The light blue haze in the lower canyon was like a thin smoke from slowly burning money. I thought that was great. And it's just, there's so much great writing like that in here. From that, we see that Archer, through MacDonald, is a very poignant observer of society and of America and of kind of the human state and just the general state of where things are. It's interesting too because a lot of this type of fiction lends or tends towards really over describing things and of painting unnecessarily detailed pictures and descriptions, whereas MacDonald really avoids that, and he's almost like kind of like a sniper where he's only really just looking at one thing. And I just realized the irony of using that analogy because the title of the book is The Moving Target. And so that also, referring to the title of The Moving Target, not only is that an allusion to Archer trying to find Samson and also trying to figure out what's going on with this story, but it's also just sort of an allusion in general to the plot where nothing really is as it seems, and it's very difficult to pinpoint who is who and what everyone's motivation is. And that's where the story works as a hard-boiled detective novel, in the sense that these stories typically are full of sort of double crosses and also kind of the slow reveal that the people who have hired the detective to do something actually want something else done, and they know that in the process of doing one thing, another thing will happen. And I'm trying hard not to give away plot points here because I think this is just a fantastic novel. I think it's a book that really deserves a lot of attention, probably maybe largely ignored now because of the time that it was published. It's easy to just sort of categorize it as, another Raymond Chandler knockoff or another Dashiell Hammett knockoff, but it's a very unique book. And the things that make it unique to me when I read it are that it doesn't get weighed down under nihilism and a sardonic commentary. Although there's a lot of commentary and observation of society, it's done in a way where the reader makes the comment themselves through the imagery and the dialogue that's presented. And that leads me to another thing that I think makes this writing so good. The dialogue in this book is just amazing. It's just like so true and so real. It reminds me a lot of Raymond Carver's dialogue, where it's just very realistic. People are not talking about what you think they're talking about, which is actually the way we talk about things. In short, it's a very satisfying, hard-boiled novel. It works. It works within the framework of crime fiction and of detective fiction. It uses the right kinds of tropes, but at the same time, it's a very new kind of detective fiction. And I would argue that even compared to a lot of crime fiction or thrillers that are published today and that are wildly popular, I would say that this book exceeds those books in many, many ways and is more refreshing than those books because it is not trying so hard to play into these sort of stereotypes, and that instead it's being a bit more observant, a bit more objective in the way that it tries to achieve its outcomes. So all in all, I think that this is definitely something that needs to be considered if you like literary fiction with a genre bent. This is not a cliched, hard-boiled detective novel. This is a novel that explores vulnerability, it explores weakness, it explores corruption of the human spirit, it explores tragedy, it explores heartbreak, it explores disillusionment. All of these things all are blended together and still wrapped into a tightly plotted novel. There you go. That's my review of Ross MacDonald's The Moving Target. Really highly underrated book. I think Ross MacDonald is a writer that deserves a lot more attention. This has been Please Read Your Book. My name's Carl, and I hope to see you again soon.